everyone, in today's video I thought I would talk a little bit about how I learned French. The first time I started learning French, I was actually in 8th grade. My middle school had this early bird program where essentially the high school started maybe like a period sooner than the middle school. They would bus us all to the high school. After that class finished, we would get bused to our middle school. So if I think about this now, we essentially were in school an extra period of the day. I remember finding it easy to learn, but I don't know like how much I liked it at this time. After that first year learning French, I honestly fell into my rebel phase and I did not care about school for like the next couple years. I ended up not caring about French moving forward, and I took like one more year in school, didn't care about it. I don't even think I learned anything. I just like got through the class and that was it, because our school made us take like 2 years of foreign language. And then flash forward, when I got to college, our college essentially had a rule where if you were getting a bachelor's in science, you had to take 1 year of a foreign language. If you're getting a bachelor's of arts, you had to take 2 years of foreign language. My original degree was in science, so I had to take 1 year of a foreign language, and I was like, hey, I took French in high school, so let's just start French again from the beginning, because I'm sure I'll remember some of the basics and it'll be easy, whatever. I had no idea that I liked foreign languages. And I'm really glad that my school forced us to take these foreign language classes, because when I got back into French, that was the first time in my life that I realized I love foreign languages. A lot of you watching this video might be younger, and I'm so envious of those of you who have discovered their interest in foreign language at a young age, because I was probably like, I don't know, 20 years old. I already felt like I was so old compared to a lot of those out there who are starting in like their grade school years. My 1 year of French in college, I ended up loving it so much that I thought I want to keep learning French. And at the time, I just really wanted to study abroad. I wanted an experience living overseas. I think in hindsight, I really wish that I went to France, because maybe that would have been a cool experience to learn. But at the time, I thought, oh, 1 year of French, I don't really know French and I don't know any other language, so why don't I just study in England, because people in England speak English. So I went abroad to England and I kept studying French in England. Although I do feel like I was in the wrong class and it was a little bit too challenging. So I can't really say I learned a lot in that program, because I felt like I didn't know what was going on. But because I got to study in England, I had opportunities to visit France. I think for the first time in my life, I had this opportunity to go to another country that didn't speak my language. Not just France, I got to travel around Europe as well and explore a lot of different countries. In my English school, there were a lot of other international students from different countries like France, Korea. That was my first opportunity to, like I say, experience the world, experience other languages and cultures, and to even just live in one. I think after I got to visit France, I just felt this was so cool, because I was able to understand things and I could talk to some people, I could read food menus, and I could kind of genuinely get by more or less at that point. And I thought it was so cool that I just decided, like, I'm gonna study French as a full-time major. I love foreign languages, I want to live abroad. And I think that was kind of when my life, I guess, started at like 20, 21 years old, because I did discover this huge passion at such, I guess, a later stage. I guess it's not that late to, you know, discover something in your early 20s. From then on, I think that became my focus in life, was to learn languages, live abroad, and just to continue experiencing the world. So after my study abroad program, I came back to my home university as a double major in French. I felt like there was this big gap I got from my school. It was meant to cover like 2 semesters of French that I would have learned in my home university, but I sort of felt like it didn't really do that for me. For those 2 semesters that I would have like replaced, I didn't retake this one. I just took the second one, like the more recent one more time. I did it as a summer class in order to start the major program the next year. So during that summer, I took the Intermediate 2 program. Intermediate 1, Beginner 1, Beginner 2, we all use this one book called Deux Mondes, like 2 worlds essentially. And honestly, like, this is the textbook I used to learn French, to at least to an intermediate level. Like, without going back to university, I still think that this book was really useful. It covers all of the basic grammar, it covers vocabulary, basically everything you need to learn about French. I'm not sure how much this is. I'll probably put a link down below for you guys. I still recommend this as a textbook, although I know that there are other textbooks out there and you can really choose whichever one you want. I don't necessarily think a specific textbook is super important, but I stand by this book. Years later, I still reference this when I need to brush up on my French. And then in the summer program, I got to read my first book in French. I'm not gonna lie, it was really hard. I had a love-hate relationship with Google Translate at the time. I remember we would read a little bit of the book. Like, I'm pretty sure we were reading an abridged version. Like, it was not like a whole book. And we would read a little bit for homework, and we would get about 10 questions. Our answers were more or less used in a classroom discussion. That class was so difficult, but it really helped me bridge that gap between just learning French to actually like learning in French, if that makes sense, in the following school year. Also, during the intermediate class, while we were reading the book, we were also practicing our writing. We would have this prompt to like come up with a story idea, and then each week we were given new prompts to like advance our story. I'm so lame because I remember my story was somehow based on Harry Potter. I was telling these really lame stories every week about Harry Potter. I think in hindsight it was so lame, but hey, I chose a topic that made me happy. But that class was really helpful because it was so focused on reading and writing that my vocabulary just shot up. Then my writing and communication also went up a lot as well. So after I finished the intermediate class, I think at this point I truly started to feel like I'm at an intermediate French level. In that first semester, we read an actual book. We spent the whole semester reading the book. So again, it was very similar where we would read some of the book for homework and answer some questions. Although at this point, it was a little bit easier because I already had this experience and my vocabulary was a lot better. In the class, we wrote essays. Gosh, I remember my first essay in that class was 15 pages. So yes, I wrote 15 pages of French, and I guarantee you it was garbage. I think after that first essay, all of our essays were 8-page limits. And I think that they did that because they really wanted us to just write. And then the future essays were more about like fine-tuning our writing. So I was writing a lot, reading a lot, and then getting my writing corrected on a regular basis. And all of our college classes were conducted in French. Granted, our professors were not native speakers, and I did get to express myself in French, but I do feel like the speaking and listening, that's all school programs to be honest, was kind of limited. But I think that since I had studied abroad and I had visited France, I had experiences using French and using terrible broken language in another country, that I remember some of the classes I took in the major program were focused on conversation. I felt that I talked a lot because when I visited France, it wasn't so much of like, oh, should I say something? It was like I have to order something or to like get by. So that fear wasn't really there. Okay, also, I'm filming right now and the sun is going down and I feel like the background is starting to look purple. It's getting dark here and I had to turn my lights on. They weren't on before. There's like a bright light like right here. So I feel like the whole background like over here, it just looks white. I'm sorry, I can't help it. I think one of the biggest assets of learning French in school was that there was a lot of reading and writing practice. This really helped me improve my vocabulary very fast. Essentially, I was just reading all the time. Granted, in these classes, you only get like a 40-50 minute class and you only get so much in that time to actually speak, because for our assignments, we had to write tons of essays every semester. And then since we were writing drafts all the time, our professors were constantly giving us feedback, correcting our mistakes, and then we would obviously have to fix those mistakes and write a new essay. I think because I wrote in French a lot, my ability to speak was just innately higher, if that makes sense. Because when I compare my experiences learning French with Korean, I've never really written essays or anything of that magnitude, and I think it makes a huge difference. Because I have such a strong writing ability in French, I find that that carries over into my speaking, because I've already trained myself how to, express myself in French. It's just I'm a little bit slower when I'm speaking versus when I'm writing. Also, one benefit of writing all the time was, so you're writing your essay, and you don't know like a connector word like however, therefore, but. So I learned a lot of those words specifically because I needed them in my essay. It's like I'm writing this essay on this topic and I don't know what this word is, so you look it up. And then you end up writing that word, and then you use it more in the essay, and eventually you commit it to memory. And I have to emphasize that when we were reading, like we were reading. Imagine you're an English major and the kind of texts that you read in English, and that's more or less what we were doing in French. Also, if you haven't studied French before, you might not realize that in French, there's kind of a verb tense that you can only see in literary French as well. And if you're reading old texts like I had to, back to 1600, there are some outdated ways of saying words. Like they say a word, you know, it's kind of like thy and thee and stuff like that in English. Like there are words like that that are common in French writing, like in old literature and plays and stuff like that, that you're not going to see or ever encounter anywhere else. So when I took French classes in Korea, we sometimes came across that and I'd be like, I know what that is because I had to read 1600s, books from the 1600s. So if you're watching this and you're not learning French in school, I think that's totally fine. I think my biggest advice to you is just to learn and to just read and write and get someone to check your writing, because honestly, I think these were the reasons that I learned French so quickly and why, even though I don't really use French, I feel like I have a stronger base understanding of French than I do of Korean. But something that I loved about my university, which I wish I could go back in time and take this class one more time because it was just honestly that great and that helpful, was we had a special class dedicated to phonetics and diction of the French language. So we spent this whole semester essentially like digesting the spoken language and improving like how we pronounce sounds and how we string like sentences together. So I really love that class, and like this is the book we used, and I'm gonna see if I can try to find this like on Amazon or somewhere. I know it's kind of expensive and hard to find, but I'll do my best to link it down below. It kind of like shows you, you know, like the different words for the parts of your mouth in French. I don't know if you can see them, but they're written in the phonetic alphabet. Because essentially what you're training yourself is to like understand what sounds are actually spoken and how the word should actually sound, if that makes sense. And this book also comes with like a ton of CDs, so you can listen to the CD and listen to how things should sound. One of the unfortunate things about learning French in school was that you really don't necessarily get to improve your speaking a lot, and if you are like me and you rely a little bit too much on the language program, then you're not going to get some of those, I guess, gaps filled, so to speak. In hindsight, when I was learning French, I was very busy. I was a double major, I had a job. I didn't really have the time to explore, to think about better ways to learn. Watching foreign shows and films on Netflix wasn't as big back then because it wasn't the same as it is now, because I feel like now there's so many things out there for me to access in French. So I will say that if you're learning a language in school, you really should seek out other opportunities outside of the classroom to speak and improve your pronunciation, because I do feel like speaking is one of those things that you're just not gonna get from a classroom. So post-university, I haven't really studied French actively too much because I moved to South Korea and I focused so much on Korean that I felt sort of guilty, like I shouldn't touch other languages because I need to like get better at this one that I need right now. I've done a lot over the years to maintain my French, and so I do feel a bit rusty. And unfortunately, because I learned French in school and I didn't really do a lot outside of school, I do feel like my French pronunciation isn't the best. In my spare time, I'll watch a lot of films or TV shows in French. Because my reading ability is so high, I don't have any problems understanding the subtitles, but sometimes I do have problems understanding what I'm listening. So I try to use both to kind of like match up what I'm reading with like what I'm listening to. And I think if I have more time in the future, I'm gonna just stop using the subtitles and try to like force my brain to figure it out. Because if I can read it, then it's like I know the language, I just need to train my ears. But essentially, I just watch a lot of film and TV shows. I read novels in French. Sometimes if I'm curious about like current events or politics going on in France or like a French-speaking country, I will try to search for news in French because I feel like there would be better news or like more information in the language. And honestly, I think listening to French music, and particularly watching French YouTube channels has really helped me feel connected to the language and feel like I'm actually maintaining it over time. I feel like this is a great way to see how people are actually speaking every day and to pick up on slang words and like expressions that I might not otherwise know that people are using. I feel like there are a lot of like English expressions that get used in France, an extent that I'm like, oh wow, like they say this too, or like they kind of translate it into French. And I find that really like kind of fun and interesting. And so I think my French has definitely improved over the years just because I focus on these like, I guess more colloquial like YouTube videos. Also, I know like when you listen to music in another language, sometimes people say this a lot, like it's not necessarily the same language. If you, like me, are interested in French at all and you guys are studying French, you'll probably know that in French they cut out a lot of sounds. When people are speaking, they contract words together where it's just like 5 consonants smashed together. I think especially when you're learning French and you're learning like different like verb tenses, you're really trying so hard to pronounce every part of that word. But if you listen to music, because people have to be able to like move from sound to sound, from word to word more quickly, you can actually start to pick up the parts where people get lazy, if that makes sense. Like this is proper pronunciation, but like this is like how much people actually pronounce some words. And if you're listening to music, I feel like it's easy to pick out where people do that. Maybe when I graduated college, I could have aimed more towards like C1, but these days I feel so rusty that I'm like, I'm probably, if I were to take the test now, I'd probably score around B2. Right now with my French, I'm definitely pretty rusty with my speaking, but I do feel that I have a stronger core ability in French than I do with Korean. That for me, my lack of confidence comes down to just being rusty. So I think genuinely at this point, if I were to really push myself with French, would quickly improve because I do have that base vocabulary, that base ability to communicate in the language. Yeah, that's essentially where I'm at with my French right now. I'm actually thinking about spending time to just brush up on my French and also to try and improve my pronunciation with the language. You know, hopefully I can make another video for you guys in the future who are learning French to help you and give you some tips and ideas as well. I guess for today's video, that's all that I have for you. So I will see you next time. Bye!